Cynthia from Love Apple Farm. I started this thing, oh gosh, when he was about 3 years old, when I was wiping the snot.
Poked me in the eye. One of the nurseries with the most esoteric tomato varieties in existence. I'm sure somebody in the comments can correct me. There's probably somebody else who does more, but we do every year over 60 different varieties of tomatoes.
And I called it Love Apple because that sounded better than Tomato Farm. And so I fell in love with tomatoes because my friends said they flipped my skirt, even though I don't wear skirts. But I fell in love with the tomato. Let's edit that one out. I fell in love with the tomato.
Well, there's a couple other reasons that it's called Love Apple. There's a few more plays on words there.
There's a few more plays on words.
I think we should go into them because
that are no longer relevant.
Nobody even really knows what they are.
Yeah, so I called my farm Love Apple Farm because my original farmhouse was built by Harry Love, who was a minor figure in historical figure in California lore. And then also the Europeans used to call tomatoes love apples because they thought they had aphrodisiac-like qualities. And I do know that people are more passionate about their tomatoes than they are about their spinach. I haven't seen very many spinach festivals out there, but I do see a lot of tomato festivals out there. Became my passion for many, many years. And I ended up growing not only love apples for a 3 Michelin-Star restaurant, but I ended up being their farmer for 11 years. I like to say 44 seasons. And Zach was with me, even though he was taught then. He went through school and came back to the farm after graduation. And side by side, we built Love Apple along with many other people, including a lot of fine apprentices who've gone off to also be culinary gardeners for Michelin restaurants as well. Tomato plants, and we spread the love by giving a lot of gardening classes at Love Apple.
Yeah, I mean, really, the tomato plant sales were a really integral part of the farm for a long time. I mean, it's not like we started growing vegetables for the restaurant and then started selling tomato plants. The tomato plant sales have been going from the beginning. We had propagated a whole bunch of tomatoes because back in those days, you couldn't just go to a nursery and find heirloom, wacky different kinds of heirloom tomato plants. It's still pretty rare these days, and so you took it upon yourself to get a bunch of tomato seeds and start a bunch of tomatoes and propagated way more tomatoes than you could plant. So we stuck a sign at the end of the driveway and started selling tomato plants. And so selling plants started to just help offset the cost of gardening, but then it kind of snowballed and grew, and more people learned about it and told their friends, and now there's a whole business around us selling tomato plants.
Yeah, there's a cult of tomatoes, I think, and in the Bay Area of California, they really appreciate their good tasting tomatoes. That love is growing as more and more and spreading out. I've retired. I retired a couple of years ago, and Zach's taken over, and he's carrying the business into a new generation and doing stuff that I could only dream of doing.
Manresa?
Well, if I'm retired, what am I doing here? So we find tomato varieties. I've been finding weird and wonderful tomato varieties from all over the world, really. I go traveling and I'll find some stuff and I'll bring it back. Don't tell customs that I'm smuggling tomato seeds into the country. I know a bunch of different tomato freaks around the world, and they'll contact me and talk me into growing a tomato variety that I'd never heard of before. And then we trial it. Our garden here is not only seed saving for our own varieties that we've developed. We've developed one called Love Apple, of course. That was the first one. Another one we've developed called Sexy Beast. Another one's called Summer Love. And we're even working on a new one this year. Doesn't have a working title yet, but see what comes out and if we can stabilize that variety and grow it on. Our seed sources vary greatly, and they're from people that don't really sell seeds. They're just wackadoodle gardeners who develop tomatoes, and they know that I'm a conduit for...
So at the nursery, we sell all kinds of different plants, mostly veggies, but also flowers. Tomatoes are our main thing. That's what we're known for. That's what we really go all out with. We've got over 60 It's over, actually, I think more like 70 or 80 varieties this year with all the one-offs. Every color of the rainbow. We've got all the different kinds of shapes, sizes. You got determinants and indeterminates, heirlooms and hybrids, and we've got pretty much something for everybody. But a lot of people come in and they ask, what's the best one? Well, if there was one single best tomato, we wouldn't be growing 70 different kinds of tomatoes. There's so much variability, and there is probably a best one for everyone's individual garden, and that is going to take some time and trial and effort to find which one is the right tomato for you. I grow, last year I grew 70 plants and about 30 different varieties, and I loved all of them. And find the right tomato for you, you have to really narrow down what's important to you. And
your climate.
And your climate. Your climate, what your growing conditions allow you to grow, and also what's important for you in a variety. If the important thing for you is, I just want to make sure I have a crop,
yep,
then you're going to probably go with a more reliable hybrid tomato, something like Better Boy, Celebrity, Carmelo. They're going to be more reliable because the hybrids have higher disease resistance and they're generally bred to be more productive. Commercial growers primarily are going to be growing hybrid tomatoes for those reasons, because it's important that they just get a crop. It doesn't necessarily matter how good it tastes because it's just going on the grocery store shelves. So flavor is not a super important thing to a commercial grower. It's mostly disease resistance and production. And that's what hybrids are mainly, in general, bred for. There's some exceptions to that rule, but that's the general rule of thumb. We've got those here because to a lot of people, that's the most important thing for them, is to make sure they get a crop. If the most important thing to you is flavor, then we've got a lot of different heirlooms that satisfy that flavor requirement, and that's going to depend on what you like. Do you want a really sweet tomato? Okay, then you're probably going to go with a green when ripe or a bicolor or a white when ripe variety like white Oxheart, Delano Green, Lillian Marie,
Gold
Texas
medal.
Star, Gold Medal, Orange Russian 117. Those are all going to be sweeter varieties. The bicolors, the orange, the yellows, the greens, the whites all tend to have a really high sugar content.
What about the blacks?
The black tomatoes are going to be a little bit more of a complex flavor. So those are going to be, if you want to have something kind of like a more smoky, maybe more complex flavor, that's going to be a black tomato. Intricate of a flavor profile than just sweet. Nothing wrong with a sweet tomato, but if you're looking for something that's got more depth of flavor, more balanced flavor, I'd go with a black tomato. If you really want something that's going to bite you back, give you that, a lot of people call it an old-fashioned tomato flavor. It's going to be a high acid content in the tomato, and that's what makes like a really good, bolognese sauce is going to be a high acid content in that tomato. You're going to want to go with what we would call a true red. And true reds, as opposed to pinks tend to be sweet. True reds tend to be a higher acidic content, more of a bite you back.
Like Brandywine Sudeth's is a great one. German red strawberry, beautiful Oxheart shape. We've got New Girl. We've got some of the red cherry tomatoes will have that flavor. Dirty Girl, the Better Boy,
Sisters.
Things like that. Well, some of the umami flavors can be found in some of the dark purple tomatoes, like our Love Apple is dark purple, mahogany red purple, Paul Robeson, Cherokee purple, black creme. Even though you've got that smoky barbecue flavor in those, some of them will also throw off like a umami flavor as well. Come in and they ask us to choose their varieties for them, and then the first questions that we ask them are, where do they live? What if they're at a higher elevation, if they're right near the coast, because we have tomatoes that'll do better in those tough growing conditions than if you were in the flatland, so to speak.
Right. I think to clarify on that point, it's important to know it's not that those tomatoes prefer the tougher growing condition. It's that they will tolerate the tougher growing condition better than a more sensitive variety.
I like to say you may tolerate your mother-in-law, doesn't mean you like your mother-in-law. So get a tomato that'll tolerate your poor growing condition. And that poor growing condition could also be a shadier garden. Tomatoes don't really like that. A garden that drops in temperature quite a bit overnight, that's a problem growing condition. So we have tomatoes that'll handle those types of conditions as well. And then once we've established their climate or terroir, so to speak, we'll then ask them what they like in a tomato, culinarily speaking, because some tomato varieties do better for sauces than others. Some tomatoes do better as slicers. Some tomatoes do better on a sandwich if you're going to take it to on a picnic. You want a tomato with very little water in it, if that's the case. If you don't want to open your Sammy at noon and have
Nobody wants a soggy Sammy.
Nobody wants a soggy
Nobody
sandwich.
wants a soggy Sammy.
No, blurg.
Yeah.
And we have tomatoes that will actually ameliorate that concern for them. We also, finally, we will try to convince them to get a color variety.
Yeah.
Because when you have a rainbow of colors in your garden, and on the plate, let's say you slice a bunch of beefsteaks for a caprese salad. And the word beefsteak, by the way, doesn't just mean red. It means any color of the tomato rainbow as long as the tomato is big and round. Beefsteak is a body type, not a color. So if you can have a white, a red, a green, a purple, an orange, a yellow, a chocolate, a brown tomato, all interspersed on the caprese salad, that's what I'm talking about.
That's a showstopper at any garden party.
And then people start to taste the different colors and try to discern different flavor profiles among the colors.
Yeah.
So it's not only a delight to the palate, it's a conversation and almost a contest to see which tomato is the best. And we'll give them tips on how to grow them so that they taste better.
Yeah.
So our tomato bomb is actually going to make your tomatoes taste better, not only grow better as well. So fertilizing at the appropriate time is key to getting better flavor in a tomato. Heck, fertilizing at all is going to do it. Plus, staying away from some of the hybrids that are tasteless. Not all hybrids are tasteless, but some of them are, as you've noted.
Yeah.
Ask, what is the biggest tomato variety? Because they also have a family contest. Who can grow the biggest tomato?
Yep. What are some of the biggest ones?
Oh gosh, Better Boy is a huge tomato. Kentucky beefsteak is a not only fantastic flavor, huge orange beefsteak, but it can get up to 3 pounds. That one, Texas Star, another beautiful bicolor. Everything's bigger in Texas. Brandywine Sudus is huge tomato. They can a bunch of salsas, or they can a bunch of sauce, and they'll come in and they'll buy a whole flat of plum tomatoes. The gold standard for plum tomatoes is San Marzano. We have an improved version of San Marzano called San Marzano 2. We also have quite a few other good workhorse plum tomatoes. One's called Plum Regal.
Amish paste.
Amish paste. Even our Sexy Beast or German Red Strawberry are great.
The thing about the Oxheart tomatoes, and it's probably my favorite shape. So each kind of serve a different purpose. Tart, round, beefsteak, those are all kind of, there's grape, those are all different tomato shapes, different body types, if you will. Not only are they really pretty, they come in sort of like a teardrop, sort of heart-shaped fruit, don't have as much juice in them, so you have fewer seeds, you have less juice. They also don't have a gel sac around the seed, and all those things make them really great all-purpose tomatoes, is what I like to call them. So they're great for canning or cooking into sauce, because you don't have to boil off all of that as much juice, and they have fewer seeds, so you get a more consistent sauce, especially if you're not putting it through a food mill or anything fancy like that, making just a stovetop sauce. You can do everything, and so that's why I love the Oxhearts, and I find they just tend to have the best flavor too. I mean,
I know that our Michelin chef really loved the Oxheart tomatoes a lot. He would craft a couple of specific dishes just around them. And they also have a nice thin skin too, which is another hallmark of them. One of their problems, though, if it is a problem, is they have very wispy, droopy foliage.
Yeah, they're a little bit more challenging to grow. So that's another criteria that you've got to think about when you're coming in to select a plant, either here or any nursery that you go to, is what is my skill level with this? If you are a beginner gardener, for the first couple of seasons, I'd say, you can try some of the more esoteric ones, but so that you don't get discouraged, get at least one reliable hybrid so that if everything kind of falls apart in the garden that year, at least you'll have one tomato that is going to produce something for you. Because I think it's really easy to get discouraged if you've spent a lot of time and effort doing your garden and you get a poor harvest. That can be devastating, and that can be chalked up to experience. You know, I don't really believe in the green thumb, black thumb from birth thing. I don't think anybody's born with a green thumb. These are all skills that need to be learned with trial and error or with classes. We've got some great classes here that we teach. We're getting some more of this content online, trying to get some of these classes potentially online in the future as well, if you're interested in that kind of a thing. But it's all about knowledge. So if you're coming in and it's your first year trying to grow tomatoes, you could try some of these more wonderful esoteric ones, and we'll definitely help you get a good start with those. But I would suggest getting at least one hybrid so that you can have something that's going to perform well in your garden and you're going to have some great tomatoes. Even a quote-unquote tasteless hybrid grown in your own backyard by you, harvested by you, and eaten that day off the vine is going to be just an entirely different world than buying a tomato in a grocery store.
And that's because when you buy a tomato in a grocery store, a big box store, they pick them green when they're immature because they're easier to harvest with machinery. They're easier to stack in a huge truck and truck them to the factory. And then they gas them with ethylene gas to bring out the red color. So there's no ripening in the sun, increasing the sugar content in the fruit via the sunlight. So even a hybrid tomato that's bred for shelf life is going to taste better when you pick it at the peak of ripeness in your own garden.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the point about them being picked, commercial tomatoes being picked green, pretty much no flavor from an unripe tomato. And I really feel sad for a lot of people who say, oh, I don't really like tomatoes, because I just think that they haven't had a decent tomato in their lives. A lot of these people who don't like tomatoes, if you've only ever had a tomato that you bought in the grocery store that tastes like water and mushy cardboard, then I understand not liking tomatoes. But if you've never tried a tomato picked fresh out of the garden, it's something that you have to do, because it's just a completely different. It's almost a different thing. It's so vastly different, the flavors between.
Even if you see on a tomato in the grocery store that says vine ripened, that is a business term, an agricultural USDA term that means as soon as the tomato starts to turn from green to a little tiny bit of a color, that's called the breaker stage. That's when they can then harvest that tomato and then market it as vine ripened, and it's not technically vine ripened.
Influencers, I'm not going to call anybody out specifically, claim that it tastes just as good as a fully ripened tomato. I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I think a perfectly ripened tomato that you pick on the exact day that it's ripe is going to just outperform in terms of flavor any tomato picked at the breaker stage or before the appropriate time to harvest it. I think a perfectly ripened tomato that you pick on the exact day that it's ripe is going to just outperform in terms of flavor any tomato picked at the breaker stage or before the appropriate time to harvest it. If you're a couple of days early, you can still kind of get away with ripening it on the counter. You're not going to lose too much flavor. But all that action of ripening and the plant converting sugars, plants are really good at making sugar, and they need active metabolism to do that. So when the tomato is getting sunlight, pulling up water, getting fertility, that tomato on the vine is just getting better and better and better the longer it goes, until eventually it rots on the plant if you don't pick it fast enough, or until you pick that glorious day when you come out to the garden and your tomato's ready to pick.
There's actually a sweet spot for it, because if it goes too far, it also degrades in flavor. So there's really that 1 or 2 days of ultimate sweetness. And a lot of people don't even know anymore when their tomatoes are ripe, because all the ones in the grocery store are rock hard because they've been picked green.
Yeah.
So we tell folks, you're waiting for not necessarily the color, you're waiting for it to yield to gentle pressure like a ripe avocado. We've missed the lore of how to tell when our tomatoes are ripe because we've been relying on supermarket tomatoes for decades. But it's really feeling them and picking them when they start just to soften. The first day they turn their ripe color is not their best day. Their best day is a couple of days after they turn their ripe color, whether it's purple or red or orange. Wait a couple more days, and that'll be when they're perfect.
Yeah. And a tomato that you grow yourself is going to be superior even to one you buy at a farmer's market. I mean, farmer's market, you can get some great tomatoes as well.
Yep.
And I'm not throwing any shade at farmer's markets. We love them. But those farmers also have to pick their tomatoes a little bit early. They're going to pick them on that first color change day because you need to be able to transport that tomato from your farm to the market. And a perfectly ripe tomato is kind of impossible to transport without it getting degraded somehow in the process of transportation, whether that's knocking together with other fruit in the box or bumping on the truck on the freeway getting to the market. They need them a little bit underripe so that they can still look good when they get them to the market. But at your house or your apartment or wherever you're growing, if you just go out and pick it and are bringing it into your kitchen, you can pick it at the exact moment that it is perfectly ripe.
Yeah, gently cradle it into your kitchen. Treat it really like
Put it on a pillow on your countertop.
When we were picking tomatoes for the Michelin restaurant, we would put them on little foam pads upside down, and they were never touching each other, and they would go so gently to the restaurant to be consumed that day. For that evening service.
Yeah, quality of a restaurant is rare. So we were growing for Manresa restaurant in Los Gatos. They ended up with, when we started growing for them, they were at 2 stars. By the time we finished the contract, they had made it up to 3 stars. And I don't want to claim any kind of responsibility for them getting 3 stars.
No,
not at all. He would have got 3 stars.
Yes,
David would have got 3 stars one way or another.
Yeah.
But that level of, if you don't know about Michelin ratings, it only goes up to 3. You don't get any more than 3 stars. That's as high as it goes in Michelin ratings. And there are only a handful of restaurants in the world that make it to 3 stars. You have to be top of the top echelon to get there. And it's not a casual walk in off the street experience. These are places you have to make reservations months in advance. They're going to be a pretty big pocketbook, pretty hard on the pocketbook.
Well, usually it's because it's a hefty price ticket because every single ingredient at a Michelin quality restaurant is of the utmost highest quality. Every single thing, even the salt, even the butter.
Yeah. David at Manresa, they had a cow that they would milk and make their own butter out from their cow.
Yeah, the chef would go out in the middle of the Monterey Bay and harvest sea salt and make his own salt.
And he'd evaporate sea salt in trays, and that's the salt they would have on the table. So like every single ingredient is just at the highest level it can, that are just absolutely obsessed with their cuisine and make it their whole life to produce the highest level of food. It's really an art form at that point.
Yeah. And the head chefs like David Kinch, they're geniuses.
Yeah.
They are geniuses. They're hardworking. They're creative. You don't get that package in very many people, all of those qualities. And he possessed that, and really proud that we were a small part of his journey at Manresa.
Even